My fiancée made a cruel joke about my mother who passed away at her own birthday party. I stood up, raised a toast, and ended our one-year engagement in front of everyone. That was not just all. What happened next was unexpected. My name's Marcus, and I work in digital risk management, which basically means people pay me to predict when something's going to collapse, an account, a company's reputation, sometimes a human. Irony's a cruel bastard. Because the last thing I ever expected to implode in public was my engagement, and I certainly didn't think I'd be the one to light the fuse. But when someone you love opens their mouth and says something so casually cruel it rips your history in half, sometimes silence feels like complicity. Sometimes the only way to hold on to who you are is to burn the whole damn house down. That's what I did at Lily's birthday party, no less. In front of everyone. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today's special shout-out goes to James Reiner from San Diego. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. We were 6 months into living together, a year engaged, 2 years dating. The party was at a rooftop bar she'd always wanted to try: string lights, live acoustic set, wine that smelled more expensive than it tasted. Her friends from work showed up first, then mine, and finally her parents. Everyone kept asking about the wedding date, and we'd smile like it wasn't a conversation we'd been silently avoiding for weeks. I kept checking my watch, pretending it was about the catering delivery. Really, I was waiting for the part of the night I always dreaded. When Lily got on, you know the type, the performance mode, slightly tipsy, loud enough for the whole table to hear, jokes aimed just a little too close to soft places. Normally I braced for it. That night, I wasn't ready, because I never thought she'd go there. The moment it happened, it was so subtle most people probably missed it. She was recounting this story from our early dating days. How I took her to this overpriced French place to impress her, but I was so nervous I kept asking for the wine list back. She imitated my voice, big and clumsy, like I was some sitcom husband from the 90s. Everyone laughed. Then she smiled that sharp little smile and said, "But honestly, I think Marcus just wanted to pretend he was his mother." She used to do this dramatic wine-swirling thing like she was auditioning for a funeral scene. Pause. Guess it makes sense, though. Grief does make people weird. A few people chuckled, unsure. One girl even raised her glass, trying to steer the tone. But it was too late. The room had gone cold inside me, like someone had poured bleach into my chest. My mother's name is Nadine. She died 2 years before I met Lily. Ovarian cancer. Slow and humiliating. She loved 2 things more than anything: jazz records and red wine. She used to swirl it not because she was dramatic, but because she said you have to let good things breathe before you judge them. That was her phrase. I never told Lily that. I never needed to. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit how little she'd listened. I remember looking at her across the table in that moment, wondering how many other stories she'd turned into punchlines. How much of my past she'd reshaped without asking. And then I stood up, just like that. In the middle of the goddamn party, with Lily mid-laugh. I raised my glass. Everyone turned. To Lily, I said. My voice sounded steady, cold, like I was reading from a script. You've always known how to work a crowd. And I think that's what I've loved most about you. How easy it is for you to make people laugh. Even at things that aren't funny. I didn't blink. Didn't raise my voice. Like my mother's death. Or the way I grieved her. Or maybe just the way I loved her. Which, come to think of it, I never should have assumed you'd understand. A few people shifted uncomfortably. One guy coughed. Lily's smile was frozen now, still holding its shape, but gone from her eyes. I kept going. So here's to you, Lily. Happy birthday. And happy ending. Because as of tonight, we're done. Engagement's off. The silence after that felt endless. A vacuum. Like the moment before a building crumbles and all the air gets sucked out. I set the glass down gently and walked out. No yelling. No dramatic music. Just heels clicking behind me and a faint chorus of whispers building like smoke behind my back. I remember wondering if I'd cry once I hit the sidewalk. I didn't. I felt clean. Not good. Not vindicated. Just clean. like I'd finally washed something off me I didn't know had been rotting there. I walked 5 blocks before I even took out my phone. 15 missed calls in 20 minutes. I didn't open a single one. What I didn't say that night, and haven't told anyone since, is that I almost forgave her. Not in that moment, but days before. There was this stretch where we were lying in bed and she reached over and held my wrist, softly, like she knew she'd been careless lately. And I remember thinking, she's trying. But now I wonder if she was just trying to keep me from slipping. Not because she loved me, but because she loved the version of me that stayed silent. The kind of man who let her use his grief as stage lighting. That version of me died the second she twisted my mother's memory into a joke. And whatever was left didn't need saving. It needed remembering. That was the last night I saw her face to face. But it wasn't the last time she heard from me. I left before the cake was even sliced. Before the drunk toasts, the selfies, the inevitable come on. It was just a joke, damage control. I walked out without checking if anyone followed me, without looking back at the rooftops glow, like a fire I didn't need to watch burn. I got into my car and drove with no destination, just away. That's what I remember most about that night. Not the betrayal, not even the anger. Just the ache of away. Streetlights blurred past like grief in motion. And the longer I drove, the more I realized something. I wasn't just done with Lily. I was done with all of it. The compromise. The second guessing. The way I'd spent a year trying to translate pain into a language she'd never even tried to learn. The next morning, I didn't answer the door. Or the calls. Or the texts. I watched my phone buzz itself into exhaustion. Her name kept flashing like an alarm I refused to acknowledge. 23 messages in 12 hours. Some apologetic. Some defensive. One just said, "Seriously?" I turned the phone over and stared at the ceiling, letting the quiet press against me like a weighted blanket. Then her mom called. I didn't recognize the number until I heard the voice. Warm, syrupy, always half a step from passive-aggressive. "Marcus, honey. I know Lily crossed a line, but you've got to admit, you've always been a little sensitive about, well, your mother." I hung up before she finished the sentence. Then I blocked her. There are some conversations that don't deserve closure. Just endings. I stayed inside for 3 days. Not because I was depressed, but because I needed silence to rewire something in me. I didn't eat much. Didn't shave. Barely showered. I just sat at my kitchen table, going through old boxes I hadn't opened in years. Letters from my mother. A few cards she wrote during chemo, her handwriting thin and shaky, but still hers. I found one I forgot existed. Tucked in the sleeve of a jazz vinyl she gave me on my 25th birthday. It said, "When someone can't honor the people you've lost, they don't deserve the person you've become. I see you, baby, even when I'm gone." I read it 6 times. Then I played the record. Her favorite track, track 3. That slow, aching sax that always made her close her eyes and hum. That was the first time I cried. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was slow, quiet, like scar tissue forming over something raw. On the 4th day, I took a long walk at dusk and passed the flower shop where I used to buy lilies for Lily. Ironic now. I didn't go in. Just stared through the window until my chest unclenched. On the way back, I saw a woman who looked like my mom from behind, same haircut, same sway in her walk. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry that time. I just kept walking. And somewhere between that moment and the next morning, I stopped feeling like the victim. I started remembering little things. Flashbacks that used to sting, but now started making sense. Like the way Lily always changed the subject when I talked about mom. Or how she'd roll her eyes when I lit a candle on her birthday. Like it was something embarrassing. I used to think that was just her being practical. But now, I saw it differently. Disrespect doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it hides in tone, in omission, in who they let you mourn. I looked through old photos of us, me and Lily. And I noticed something that hadn't clicked before. In every picture where I looked genuinely happy, her smile looked performative. Like she was standing next to the version of me she thought would fit better on her Instagram than in real life. But the thing that broke me wasn't a photo. It was a voicemail. An old one I didn't know was still saved. From about 8 months back. I must have accidentally archived it. I only found it because I was clearing space on my phone. It was from a night I came home late from visiting Mom's grave. I texted Lily that I needed some time alone that evening. In the voicemail, she didn't know she was still recording. It starts with her laughing with a friend, Rachel, I think. Then she says, he's at the cemetery again. I swear, he grieves like it's a full-time job. It's honestly kind of pathetic. More laughter. At least when my dog died, I didn't turn it into a damn holiday. End recording. I didn't throw my phone. Didn't scream. I just sat there in that stillness where your body goes numb and your thoughts suddenly sharpen like knives. Because now it wasn't just about the party or the joke. It was a pattern, a buried truth. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd never seen the line to begin with. And I'd spent a year thinking love meant tolerance. But love without respect isn't intimacy. It's exposure. And I'd been naked in front of a woman who never deserved to see me grieve. That night, I took down all the framed photos of us. Not out of rage, but ritual. I wrapped them in newspaper and slid them into a box marked storage. I didn't throw them away. Not yet. I wanted to keep them. As evidence. Not of the love we had, but of the lie I'd almost let rewrite my past. Then I opened a blank journal and wrote one sentence across the first page. I remember now. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. Because remembering is how you begin to get free. And I wasn't done yet. The first thing I did was stop calling it a breakup. That word made it sound mutual, civilized, even accidental, like something that just happened between two people who didn't know better. But this wasn't that. This was a surgical extraction, a removal of rot. And I wasn't grieving a lost love anymore. I was grieving the version of myself I'd handed over piece by piece to someone who never earned it. So I started documenting, not out of pettiness, but out of clarity. I bought a new notebook and gave it a name. Things she didn't know I remembered. Every entry was a moment, a detail, a flash of disrespect I'd swallowed to keep the peace. And as I wrote, I realized just how loud silence can be when you finally let yourself hear it. There was the time she told me I was too attached to my mother's necklace, the one I kept in the drawer next to my socks, the one I touched whenever I was anxious. Or how she once asked me if I thought I was emotionally stunted for still setting a place at the table on Mom's birthday. I'd laughed it off back then, called it dark humor. Now I see it for what it was, erosion. Tiny chisel strikes against the foundation of who I was before her. And what struck me hardest wasn't the words, but the fact that I'd let them pass. That I'd smiled, nodded, made excuses for her cruelty because I was afraid of being alone with my grief again. But I wasn't alone now. Not exactly. On the 6th day, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Sasha. She was my mother's hospice nurse during the last 6 months. We'd stayed loosely connected after Mom passed, mostly through holiday texts and the occasional forwarded memory. She answered on the first ring. Her voice, warm and immediate, like stepping into an old sweater. I didn't tell her everything. Just that I'd called off my engagement and that I wasn't sure who I'd been in the relationship, or how to find the man I was before it. She didn't ask for details. Just said, let's get coffee, talk, or sit in silence, if that's easier. It was the first invitation I didn't dread. We met at this tucked-away cafe near the edge of the city, the kind of place with real books on the shelves and music that didn't try to impress you. I didn't plan to talk much. But something about the way Sasha looked at me, not like a man who'd been abandoned, but like someone mid-rescue, made the words come. I told her about the party, the joke, the voicemail. She didn't flinch, just listened. Then she said something I didn't expect. Some people can't handle the gravity of real loss, so they mock it. Because mocking is easier than witnessing. I let that sit between us. Then she added, you didn't walk away from Lily. You walked back to yourself. That was the moment it shifted for good. Not the pain, it was still there, curled up like a sleeping dog in my chest. But the purpose changed. I wasn't just moving on. I was reconstructing. Quietly. Intentionally. Like a man patching up a home after the storm has passed, knowing the next one will come but no longer fearing it. I started waking up early. Jogging without music. Cooking meals I hadn't made in years, recipes my mother used to teach me in fragments. I played the jazz records. I sat on the floor with candles lit and talked to her picture like she could still hear me. Maybe she could. I don't know. But it felt real. And meanwhile, I watched Lily. Not directly. I didn't follow her. But I saw the ripple effects. A mutual friend sent me screenshots of her Instagram posts. Long captions about navigating grief and growth, and being misunderstood by people who fear humor. Her followers ate it up. Hearts, comments, encouragement. It was performance, nothing more. A carefully curated redemption arc she controlled with hashtags and filters. I didn't feel anger, just something colder, cleaner. The way you feel when you finally understand your opponent's playbook. Because that's what she was now, not an ex. A strategist. And I'd spent a year playing her game without realizing I was even on the board. So I decided to stop playing defense. I didn't confront her, didn't post, didn't reach out to mutual friends. Instead, I started writing emails. Never sent them, just wrote them. To her, to myself, to my mother. I kept them in drafts under the folder title, Reconstruction. Each one stripped away the noise, the manipulation, the guilt. Each one reminded me of the facts, not the emotions, not the what-ifs. The facts. She made a joke about my dead mother. She mocked my grief. She minimized my mourning because it made her uncomfortable. Full stop. And once I let those words sit without editing, without justifying, I felt something click back into place. Like I'd finally drawn a perimeter around my pain and dared someone to cross it again. The last thing I did before the chapter closed was this. I went back to the rooftop. Alone. Same time of day. Dusk. The place was quieter now, off-season. I ordered a glass of red, sat at the same table, and pulled out the photo. The one of my mother holding that wine glass, half smiling mid-sip. I left it on the table, face up, and toasted her in silence. No words. Just presence. I waited there until the sun dipped low enough to throw shadows over the seat across from me. Then I stood up. Walked away. Left the photo behind. Sometimes you don't need to make a scene. Sometimes you just leave the evidence where it can haunt them better than you ever could. I never replied to her texts. Not directly. But I didn't stay invisible either. I let her see the edges of me, like a reflection in a mirror she couldn't clean. I posted once, a quiet photo of my mother's necklace resting on a page from her favorite book. No caption, just the image. Within 2 hours, Lily had viewed the story. Within 4, she'd posted one of her own, her hand holding a wine glass, fake laugh in mid-bloom. The caption, "We move forward." The irony? It was the same rooftop. Same table. Same pose. She was rewriting the scene, trying to reclaim the stage like nothing had burned beneath it. But the thing about ashes is, they stain what you try to bury them under. She was performing resilience. I was building it. Quietly. Strategically. First, I called a mutual friend, Jen, someone Lily had always kept at arm's length because she overshared. Jen and I hadn't spoken since before the engagement, but she answered my message immediately. Coffee turned into conversation, and conversation turned into confessions. About how Lily had always downplayed my grief. About how more than once, Lily had joked that she'd have to compete with a ghost. I didn't act surprised. I just listened. Then I gave Jen something, without asking for anything in return. A recording. The voicemail. The one Lily never meant for me to hear. I told her she could do what she wanted with it. I didn't care anymore. That was the first move. Within days, the quiet started to shift. A post was taken down. Then another. She unfollowed a few mutuals. One of her closest friends commented on someone else's post. Wish people would learn when silence isn't strength, just guilt. I didn't have to touch a thing. That was the beauty of it. I let her reputation eat itself from the inside. Not because I wanted her destroyed. That was never the goal. I wanted her exposed. Not with drama. With clarity. That's the real punishment. For someone who manipulates narratives, the worst thing you can do is make them live in the truth with no script to hide behind. And then came the box. I spent an evening carefully packing it. Not everything. Just the things that mattered to her. A watch she bought me, but always wore herself. The copy of her grandfather's book she made me promise to keep safe. A bracelet she left in my drawer after a fight she didn't think I remembered. On top, I placed the burned invitation from her birthday party, edges blackened, text still legible. And beneath that, a photo of my mother. Not one Lily had ever seen. Just her, laughing, holding a glass of red. Mid-toast. I left a note on the back. She had better timing than you. I didn't sign it. I mailed it to her office, not her apartment. She would open it in a space where she couldn't scream. That was the second move. The third was simpler. I started saying her name again. Not in anger. Not in stories. Just in truth. When people asked what happened, I stopped protecting her. I told them. Not the dramatic version. Not the embellished one. Just facts. She made a joke about my dead mother. I ended it. And every time I said it, I watched their face shift, not in pity, but in recognition. Like something slid into place. Like they'd seen it too. That crack in her smile. That coldness under the charm. One by one, people stopped trying to defend her. The ground was shifting beneath her, and I didn't have to lift a finger. But the most important return wasn't to the world. It was to my mother. I went back to her grave. Not with flowers, but with something heavier. I brought the wine glass. The one she loved. The one Lily mocked. I poured a little into the dirt. Sat beside her and played the voicemail again. Not Lily's, but the one I'd kept from Mom. One I hadn't let myself hear in months. Her voice crackled through the phone speaker, weak but smiling. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye properly. So let me say this. You are not alone. Not then, not now, not ever. You are my best thing, Marcus. Even when I'm gone. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Deep. Grounded. Like someone whose roots had finally reached water. That night, Lily sent one final message. No apology. No ownership. Just 5 words. Can we talk in person? I stared at it for 10 minutes before I replied. Just one line. Same place. Your birthday. Next week. 1 hour. That was the 4th and final move. The board was set. She thought this was closure. She didn't realize it was a mirror. I wore the same jacket I wore the night she joked about my mother. Not out of sentiment. Out of strategy. It still had the wine stain on the inside seem small, almost invisible, but there. Proof. I wanted to feel it against my skin while I watched her try to rewrite history with a new tone and softer words. I arrived early. Ordered her favorite wine. The same brand from the party. Same year. The waiter raised an eyebrow, probably assuming it was an anniversary or reconciliation. I didn't correct him. Let him set the stage. That's what this was, a stage. And she was about to find out who owned the lights now. Lily showed up exactly 5 minutes late. Same oversized beige coat. Same curated expression of vague remorse. She'd worn her hair down, maybe hoping to soften whatever image I'd formed in the weeks since I left. But the second she sat down, I could see it in her eyes. She didn't know which version of me she was walking into. That was good. I wanted her unbalanced. I didn't speak at first. Just nodded, then gestured to the glass already poured for her. She stared at it like it might be poisoned. That was the first real crack in her posture. She started talking before I did. Marcus, I didn't think it would land that way. I was trying to lighten the mood. Everyone was being so serious, and I held up a hand. Not aggressively. Just enough to stop the spin. You don't need to explain, I said. We're not here for that. She blinked. Then what are we here for? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. Plain. Sealed. No name on the front. I slid it across the table. She didn't touch it right away. What's this? Evidence, I said. In case the story you're telling yourself ever starts to sound too noble. She opened it slowly. Inside, a printed transcript of her voicemail. Word for word. Laughter included. Beneath it, I'd written just one line. You can't edit who you were when you thought no one was listening. She read it once, twice. Her face shifted with each line. Defensiveness, disbelief, then something closer to recognition. Not guilt. Never guilt. Just the fear of losing control over a narrative she'd been used to owning. She looked up, mouth parting like she might attempt some diluted version of an apology. I didn't give her the chance. Do you know why I brought you here? I asked. She didn't answer. I raised my glass. The same toast I began with weeks ago. To you, Lily. For teaching me what grief really looks like when someone pretends it doesn't matter. And for helping me realize silence isn't strength. It's survival. I paused. But I'm not surviving you anymore. She didn't drink. I didn't expect her to. Then I leaned forward. Close enough that she had to stop pretending this was about closure. You don't get to use my pain for your punchlines. You don't get to rewrite the ending. This, I gestured between us, isn't a reunion. It's a reckoning. I stood up. Slid the glass of wine toward her. Then the photo, the same one from the graveyard. My mother, smiling in full color. I let it sit there, face up. She would have seen through you, I said. But she would have still been kind. That's the difference between her and me. And with that, I walked out. No shouting, no chaos. Just the soft clink of a wine glass and the weight of a woman realizing she no longer had a mirror to perform into. She'd have to sit with herself now. Unscripted. I didn't look back. Not once. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. But I welcomed it. Let it sting my lungs. Let it clear whatever residue was left. I had one more place to go. Then this would be done. The day after I saw Lily for the last time, I did something I'd put off for months. I drove upstate, to where they'd scattered my mother's ashes, near the cabin she loved, just past the bend in the trail where the air always smelled like pine and river stone. I packed light. Just the old vinyl she gave me, the wine glass, and a letter. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't need an audience. I needed distance. Not from the world, but from who I'd been inside it, dragging my grief behind me like a rusted chain I thought I had to wear forever. I parked near the overlook. Hiked in silence. Not reflective. Just quiet. Sometimes you don't need to think to heal. Sometimes you just need to move your body through a space where no one knows your name. I found the spot easily. Still shaded. Still overgrown with ivy and the same crooked stone marker someone had etched Nadine into with a pocket knife. Crude but sincere. I sat cross-legged, poured a little wine into the grass, then pulled out the vinyl. No player. No power source. Just the sleeve in my lap and the memory of that melody in my head. I could almost hear her humming, soft, slightly off-key, smiling like she knew something you didn't. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. That was the thing about her. She never needed to be loud to be present. That's how I wanted to remember her now. Not as a symbol of my pain, but as proof that love, the real kind, doesn't require performance. It just is. I took out the letter, unfolded it slowly. The handwriting wasn't mine. It was hers. I'd found it tucked inside a cookbook weeks ago, but hadn't had the strength to read it until now. The top just said, "For when you forget who you are." It wasn't long. She wrote about how grief would distort my reflection if I let it, about how people would try to flatten my pain into something palatable for them, and about how I didn't owe anyone a softened version of myself just to keep the room comfortable. At the end, she wrote, "Forgive them, but don't let them stay. The ones who laugh when you cry will never help you heal." That line sat with me like a final stitch closing an old wound. I folded the letter, kissed it once, and placed it under a stone. Not as a goodbye, just a bookmark. Then I sat back and let the sun hit my face until the wind shifted. I stayed until dusk, until the light changed, until I could feel her not as absence, but as space, like a room inside me had been emptied and swept clean. That's when I knew I was done building shrines to pain. Driving home, I took the long way, windows down, no music, just the open road and the slow realization that I didn't hate Lily. Not really. Hating her would mean she still had some kind of hold on me. But she didn't. She was just a lesson now. A chapter. A name I no longer had to carry like a scar. And strangely, I felt grateful. Because without her betrayal, I never would have remembered who I was before I started making myself smaller to fit her idea of me. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me. When I got home, I opened my phone. The voicemail was still there. My mother's voice, light but fading. "You're going to be okay," she said. "Even when it doesn't feel like it, you're already becoming the version of yourself I always saw." I played it one more time. Then I deleted it. Not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't need proof anymore. The next day, I passed Lily on the street. Random. Coincidental. She looked right at me. Paused. I nodded. Not with warmth. Not with contempt. Just peace. That was all. She didn't speak. Neither did I. She walked past. And I swear, I never felt lighter. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's release. Sometimes the real win is no longer needing to be understood. Sometimes the best final word is no word at all. If this story struck something in you, if you've ever had to reclaim your voice after someone tried to silence your grief, then don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. I release daily stories where pain becomes power and silence becomes strategy. Your story matters. And sometimes, hearing someone else's is how we begin to understand our own.